episode 100. Y'all know I've been telling y'all I don't know what I have in store for episode 100. But I tell you how we're going to get things started on episode 100. We're going to dive into some NFL. And we're mainly going to start this off by looking at what in the hell is going on with the Las Vegas Raiders. I can tell you right now, don't bet your stock on the Raiders. So we know yesterday that the Raiders fired Josh McDaniels, and there's some history about that too, because Josh Daniels has made history. But we'll get to that later. But two of the stars of the Raiders have decided to choose violence against Josh McDaniels with fiery post-game comments. Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs, the two stars of the team. So a 26-14 loss to the Detroit Lions put the Las Vegas Raiders at 3-5, tied for last place in the AFC West. Do you remember just not too long ago, about 8 games ago, they were actually leading the AFC West? Does anybody remember that? I mean, seriously, does anybody remember when they were leading the AFC West? Well, that was 8 games ago. Most curious was the Raiders' offense, in particular, the overall lack of involvement for its two main stars, wide receiver Davante Adams and running back Josh Jacobs. After 3 straight games of 20-plus touches, Jacobs has now received 12 and 17 respectively in weeks 7 and 8. Meanwhile, Davante Adams had 1 reception all night, 7 targets for 11 yards. All of that despite the team having starting quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo back in tow. So what gives? Well, Adams and Jacobs certainly didn't excuse Josh McDaniels in it all with their deliberate post-game comments. His seat just got warmer. Raiders stars leave no excuses for Josh McDaniels. Davante Adams, to his credit, bit his tongue, but his silence says a lot. Tayshaun Reed at Tayshaun Reed on X, formerly known as Twitter. Davante Adams, I don't know what to say at this moment. I truly don't. Says, I wish I had the words to say something that's not going to get blown up in the media and taken out of context, Adams said. He also said he felt frustration. Overall, given the circumstances, probably the best you can expect from a frustrated star player after such a disappointing loss and disappointing individual game. Adams was seen on camera slamming his helmet during the game, clearly frustrated over his lack of involvement in the offensive game plan. While Adams didn't name McDaniels or even leave much room for interpretation, the frustration and tension in the locker room leaves plenty on McDaniels' plate to try to solve. Josh Jacobs was less cordial, simply saying, it ain't my job when asked how to fix the offense. Subtly, he said, it's McDaniels' job. Ask him. Later, Jacobs was asked if he saw any bright spots for himself in the passing game, where he caught 2 passes for 27 yards on Monday. He's also top 3 in receiving yards among the running backs. He said, that bleep don't matter, bro. I ain't trying to hear that. Jacobs' response, clearly, frustrations are mounting. Of course, as we know, the Raiders have decided to move on from that. And they have gone ahead and brought in, well, they didn't bring in, they just went with an interim coach who's already on staff, Antonio Pierce. And he, too, if you listen to him, let's just say that press conference that he had basically had some people ready to run through a brick wall because of the energy that he brought. But the question is, can anything turn this situation around? I mean, the Raiders have been what? The Raiders have basically been the Raiders. I mean, whether they be Los Angeles Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, and now the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, what can turn this team around? Maybe an interim coach can turn them around, but will he be in consideration for the job permanently? Now, Josh McDaniels, on the other hand, he has the distinction of probably being about the only coach to get fired from two jobs in the middle of the season. I thought the Houston Texans for a while, I thought, sure, they had the thing going because they brought in coaches and they were kind of acting like University of Kentucky basketball program. Their coaches had the distinction of being one and done. But Josh McDaniels, if I'm correct, this is his second time being half done. Not one and done, but half done. How do you get that distinction of being the only coach to get fired not once, but twice, halfway through the season, in your only season as a coach? Help me. Somebody please help me help that make sense, because that doesn't. Matter of fact, I think the Houston Texans are going to break their trend of one and done coaches. I think they just might give this coach a couple of more years to get things figured out. But I'm trying to effort pulling up some of the audio from the Antonio Pierce introductory press conference, and I am going to do that right about now, as he has some interesting things to say. So we're going to chime in and listen at some of the press conference of Antonio Pierce and what has some people excited.
Remarks from Coach Pierce, and then we'll hear from Jim Kelly, and we'll open up for questions.
Yep. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you to Mr. Davis, Josh McDaniels, Dave, Patrick Graham for bringing me here and giving me this opportunity. It's never easy when you lose a teammate, a coworker, somebody that you're close with. We take that very seriously. There's lives and families that's affected by this, and we understand that. But it's a new day. It's a new chapter. It's a new era. It's a new mindset. What is that mindset? It's that of the Raider pride, the commitment to excellence, and making sure our alumni, our fan base, and Raider Nation are proud of what they see on the field. What does that look like? Tough, passionate, effort, energy, that enthusiasm that you see when we all watched our kids and these young men who are now pro athletes play when they're in Pop Warner. Having that love for the game. We're on the same page. Champ and myself, our staff is connected. We had a great team meeting this morning. Everybody was stilly-eyed and focused. We walked in with a smile on our face. The synergy, the energy in this building, and the personality of our players will reflect on who we are as Raiders. This was a great opportunity for myself. I'm humbled, I'm honored, and I don't take it lightly. I'm sure there'll be questions about why, how. Those will all get answered. But this is about the players, this is about the Raiders, and this is about this organization. And we're tired of losing. It's not a good feeling. We're a production-based business. We're about competition, being competitive, and play with an edge and a swag and a certain confidence that when we walk out that damn tunnel, that everybody watching TV can see it, and a product on the field is something we're proud of.
I had a few things before we move forward. You know, again, to Josh McDaniels, Laura, and the kids, David Ziegler, Carissa, and the kids, I love you all dearly. So much respect for you. My thoughts and prayers are with you, and I'm forever grateful. For those of you who know me, you guys have seen me with my 3 daughters. Like, they are my everything. Today, my middle child turns 10. Her name is Chloe. So happy birthday, Chloe. Today, you are my favorite daughter. They are the best parts of me. To my wife, Stephanie, like, I'm not here without your support. Like, she's a real GM, and I love her dearly. Although the circumstances are not ideal, there's always like an opportunity in difficulties. I couldn't be prouder to accept this opportunity as an interim general manager for the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm so eager and excited to get to work. To Mark Davis, Sandra Morgan, Larry Dilson, thank you for believing in me. Thank you for this opportunity. I promise you that I won't squander the moment. Make no mistake, I'm prepared for this position. I believe in the power of intercessory prayer. I know people all over the country are praying for me in this moment. I've received so much support from colleagues, GMs across the league, former players, coaches, advisors, family, friends, my Champ Camp Warriors. Like, I promise you I'll get back to you. I'm one of those guys that when I see the little dot of missed messages, I got to go through all of them. So I promise to get back to you. I'm prepared for this because I know what I don't know. Like, there will be hiccups. It won't be perfect. But I'm wise enough to know that God equips those he calls. I'm perfectly imperfect, but I know the source. To Raider Nation, in the squad meeting this AM, we talked about committing to 3 things: trust, pride, and poise. We talked about having a commitment to excellence. We talked about confidence, just winning. We're going to put our blinders on, and we're going to run our own race. Like, we don't get to pick the terrain. There will be hills. There will be potholes. We got to run on some pebbles. And the race is not always won by the swift or the strong, but it's won by those who persevere. To our fans, I hear your concerns. I share your frustrations. We're going to work to present to you a product worthy of your support. Thank you for sticking with us. I look forward to seeing you fill up Allegiant Stadium on Sunday. With this, I open up for questions.
Antonio, you just outlined a mantra and a mindset that you want this team to be about. What can you do to immediately get that message across to the players that that's what they put out on the field on Sunday?
Yeah, one is empowering your coaches and your players in the building to have the dialogue and openness and accountability and the trust and the respect for one another where we can start to make change. That's first and foremost. It starts when we walk in this building. Enjoying and loving the fact that you're a Raider. Embracing the fact that you're a Raider. Loving the fact that you're next to your brother. When you start doing those things and you start playing together, that energy and what I talked about with those guys, the synergy in the building, now we have a connection. And now we can start growing for that. But at the end of the day, you understand, just like I do, it's a production-based business. We have to produce. We have to play hard for 61 minutes, which we'll do. And we have to play with the effort that everybody's used to the Raider Nation playing with.
On a human level, how do you go about compartmentalizing, thoughts that you may have about, obviously this team is going to be in a situation after this season where they're looking for a new head coach, a new GM, with focusing on the present, but also maybe thinking forward to those types of things to maybe be considered for those openings?
The reality for me is, Tayshaun, is I'm focusing on one day at a time. Like, we say we're team no sleep. Like, we talked late last night, woke up early this morning, got together, excited to bring this vision together. But we're not looking forward to tomorrow, that tomorrow will worry about itself. We're focusing on the now. Our team is focusing on the now. Those players are focusing on right now, and that's all we have.
And that is some of the press conference with Antonio Pierce, interim head coach, as well as interim general manager, Champ Kelly, which if you heard my podcast yesterday, this isn't the first time that Champ Kelly has been up for general manager. He's applied for this job, and now he's on here as an interim. So you have 2 guys showing what their worth is toward an owner by the name of Davis, first name Mark. So my question is, if the Raiders have a successful season moving forward based on the fact that you're doing it with 2 interims, do they get first shot at the job? I mean, how many times have we seen throughout the course of history that, an interim coach gets tagged, then the players rally around the coach, only the team owner decides, well, you know what? It was successful, but we want someone for the long term. We wish him the best. He could stay on if he wants. All the stuff that you're used to hearing. Plus, this is another way, because the NFL is in a influx. There's always that race card that rears its head. So now you have a man of color, an interim coach. You also have a man of color, interim general manager. Of course, this would not be the first time that the Raiders have had a man of color as a head coach, Art Shell. And he persevered for some years. I think they gave him at least a 5-year rope. I may be wrong about that. Hopefully I can get a caller on and we will discuss this. Because you have to look at the narrative as it is, the culture as it is. The Raiders definitely need a change of culture. And maybe this would be a good start. Not just because these are men of color, but because they're being entrusted for the remainder of the season to put their stamp on this organization. Should they do that, and should it turn out to be a successful move, I think then they're proving their worth. But what I'm going to do right now is I hope to have a caller on the other side of this break, but I am going to take a break right now. And as I go to break, news has just flashed that Walter Davis has also passed. So now we have first Coach Bobby Knight, and now Walter Davis. Rest in peace, Walt. But we'll be back on the other side of this break, so don't you dare go nowhere. You're in the zone with Anthony. Stay locked in the zone. Welcome you back to the In the Zone. Don't know why my music bed isn't playing, but hey, there are other things to worry about besides the music bed not playing. But I am glad you are tuned in to the 100th episode. That's right, episode number 100 of In the Zone. And as I went into that last break, I shared with you that I just got news on the passing of Walter Davis. Some of y'all remember him. He played his college ball in North Carolina. I remember watching him when he was playing for the Phoenix Suns. He was a very slick individual, very smooth individual with one of those smooth guards. I mean, he was like silky smooth. I mean, I'm not going to say that I was a big Phoenix Suns fan, but there were some things about Phoenix that made me watch them, at least. I'll put it to you this way. I was I'm not going to say the most, but I was anti-Laker because growing up, I was a big Seattle Supersonic basketball fan. As a matter of fact, I actually have a Seattle Supersonics ball cap that I picked up at a local sports store. I'm here in Wichita, Kansas. And I couldn't stand the Lakers because they were always eliminating Sonics. Matter of fact, I didn't like the Washington Bullets either because once the Sonics got past the Lakers, they ran into the Bullets and pretty much got shot up one side and down the other. I guess that's why come they did away with the name Bullets. Never know. But anyway, I am fortunate enough that I do have someone that I can get on the line, a good friend of mine's. We're going to buzz him up like right now. Get him on the line. He is in waiting.
Hey, brother.
And here he is, the voice you hear coming way from the state of enchantment, or whatever he wants to call it himself. He stays there. I'm not going to talk about him, where man is from. But my good friend that I can call up on the spur of a moment, all you got to do is say, we talking sports, and if he's not busy, he's game. And this is his first time in the zone. My friend, my brother, yes, you heard him call. He said, what's going on, brother? So quite naturally, that's my brother too, Ed Nunez.
How you doing, man? I'm from the great state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment, and a lot of times a lot of people call it the land of entrapment because I always hear people say this, I'm leaving, I'm never coming back. And then I'll see them 2 or 3 years later. I say, man, what happened? I thought you were gone, Well, I couldn't, the sunsets, the green chili, the people, the culture. I couldn't get New Mexico out of my system, man. So, I've lived here all 61 years of my life in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was at the pit last night watching my New Mexico Lobos play an exhibition. And I'm still the voice of Western New Mexico, Mustangs out there in Silver City. So, my sports life is full, brother. But when you call, man, it's, I love to chat sports with you. So I'm glad you called.
Yes, and as I alluded, this is the first time in the zone. He's been in my other podcasts. He's entrusted his life with me behind the wheels of a locomotive. I still have not examined his head to figure out what in the heck is wrong with this man. But today he gets to be in the zone, in the comfort of in the zone. So, we could almost call it the comfort zone today since we're not behind the wheel of a locomotive. So, anyway, I shared with him in a chat to get him on here that we just lost Walter Davis today. Yesterday, we're talking about the passing of Bobby Knight. But before we get into that, I don't know if you had a chance to hear the press conference of Antonio Pierce, who's now the interim coach for the Raiders. And they also have an interim GM by the name of Champ Kelly. Now, what's ironic about this is, keep in mind that the NFL still has an issue with hiring men of color. We make no bones about it. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's not about the color. It's about the, are they qualified? And sometimes, even if they're qualified, let's just face it, with the NFL, there's still somewhat of a good old boy system, and some coaches just won't get a sniff. But now we have Antonio Pierce, interim coach, Champ Kelly, interim GM. Two guys are the men of color who's getting a chance to put their stamp on this Raider organization. Does it work or does it not work?
I think the Raiders, if you remember, Al Davis had no qualms about hiring Art Shell.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. Right. So I heard Antonio Pierce. He grew up in Compton, grew up with the Raiders. Chris Berman used to crack me up when he said that, man.
The Raiders, right.
Old NFL films. John Facenda, the voice of NFL films, the voice from God, I would call it. I used to love to watch NFL films with John Facenda, the poem they have about the Raiders. And nobody said it better than John Facenda. I think I'm a Cowboy fan. You and I are Cowboy fans.
Absolutely.
I think the league is better when the Raiders are good. I remember, I love the Cowboys, right? But I remember watching back in the day with Stabler, Biletnikoff,
yeah.
Cliff Branch,
Yeah.
Shell, and Gene Upshaw. Highway left, they called them. They were so dang good on that offensive line. Alzado, Matuzak. I mean, I loved watching them. My dad, he cared nothing. My dad was a worker, man. He had to quit school at 6th grade to work. He could have cared less about sports, but he never missed it. My brother and I playing in high school basketball, he never missed a game. He was there for us. But he loved the Raiders because of Jim Plunkett and Tom Flores. They mentioned they would call Flores Flores, and it's Flores. It's Flores, man.
All right.
You
got to roll that R. You got to roll that R.
Yes, it's Flores, man. It's not Flores. It's Flores. And so my old man loved the Raiders because they had two Mexican Americans, Plunkett at quarterback, and Flores is the coach. Now, my dad didn't know anything about football, but he'd watch the Raiders because of that. So going back to Antonio Pierce, I saw that. I mean, that dude came out. I saw just a little bit. He says, "Hey, I'm from Compton. I grew up around the Raiders, man." So he's the interim, and I wonder. Mark Davis is a different owner than his father Al, Al involved with everything. I think at the end they said that he didn't have a computer. He was losing it, right? He didn't have the computer thing, computer programming. He said he had all the information in his head, which we know is impossible for a football organization. We know that's impossible. He was, but the man was a maverick.
Well, wait. Let me stop right there. Jerry Jones still carries a flip phone around.
That's we can go on and on about Jones. He didn't make no moves at the trade deadline, and says they're okay. But going back to the Raiders, I think we'll see. Again though, remember Al Davis had no qualms at all about hiring Archell, and
right.
So he broke. I think I'd like to see. I want to see I thought Josh McDaniels. He did good at New England as an offensive coordinator. Didn't do so well as a head coach at Denver, and then I thought he would do okay here in Garoppolo. I read an article about him in Sports Illustrated a couple of weeks ago, and they're expecting him to be injury free and be the Garoppolo to game manager. Never great, but made some good plays for San Francisco. Got him to a Super Bowl. And it didn't work out.
Right.
We saw Monday night, you saw Devontae Adams throwing his helmet. He's very frustrated. He's wide open, and Garoppolo's, he can't get him the ball. And, it's a shame because I like him personally. He's never been a great quarterback, but adequate, right? He won an NFC championship, helped his team. But again, that system they have in San Francisco, I think, is more conducive to a scheme, right? A scheme. Look at Purdy; he's missing a couple of playmakers, and they've lost 3 in a row. So I think I'm rooting for Antonio Pierce, man. I'm not a Giant fan. I remember number 58. I think he smacked Romo one time, and Romo tried to get up. I give it to Romo. He tried to get up and play with broken ribs, and he tried to run back in. They're like, no, sit down. You're not going anywhere. So I'm not a Giants fan per se, but you've got to give that Giant defense at that time, with him being a part of it, was very good. So yes, I'm rooting for Antonio Pierce. They went through the Rooney Rule about trying to hire more men of color. Brian Flores, the ex Miami coach, has a lawsuit. And, we know how this thing has rolled, Anthony. Yeah. For a long time, they didn't. And let's be honest here, okay? I know people are going to be like, oh, everybody's woke, this and that. This is some of it's just true, okay? We have to be honest about it. A lot of the owners did not want to hire people of color. We have to be honest, okay? They didn't. They've done better here and there, right? But I'm rooting like heck for Antonio Pierce. I really am. I believe the league is better when the Raiders are better. I think everybody would agree with that. It's exciting. I mean, they're villains, right? Back in the day, they were villains. And Davis embraced that. Al Davis loved to embrace that, right? It brought him more money in the coffers. He's the maverick. People hated him. Pete Rozelle hated him. They won the Super Bowl in '83, and they didn't even shake hands, man. They didn't even shake hands because Rozelle was mad that Davis had moved the Raiders to Los Angeles. So... I think I'd love to see them be successful again. You and I are huge, like I said, huge Cowboy fans, but that's a franchise. I used to love the Snake, man. Who didn't love Stabler? Gosh darn, man.
Kenny Stabler, the Snake, man. And how many games did he actually play under the influence of adult beverages?
Man, cost him his life later, right? I mean,
you're right.
It cost him his, a little bit, and that's why when you mentioned, we'll get to it later, Walter Davis, and I read it, dying of natural causes at 69. I'm like, what does that mean? I mean, he's not, again, one thing, Anthony, when the Lord has our name, he has our names in his book, and it's time, right?
Right.
But when I read that, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He's 69. I mean, and I'm 61. I've been working out, trying to stay above ground for as long as I can, but there's no guarantees. When God says it's time, it's time. It's time.
Like me, just yesterday, I'm under, they didn't put me completely to sleep. They just kind of made me sleepy because I had 2 stents put in my heart yesterday because I got an enlarged heart. The ongoing story behind it, when the doctor's telling me about this, I said, well, doctor, the reason my heart is so large because I got a wife now. you try to make the best of a situation that doesn't sound good, but I trust the doctors that God has put in my life, to keep my heart functioning as well as it can function for as long as it can function. So, but yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, with Walter Davis. But real quick back to the Raiders situation, and you're talking about how we're Cowboy fans. When I was thinking about I wanted to play football, my parents didn't let me play football. The one thing I wanted to be was a punter because of one guy, and I just gave you his last name, Ray Guy.
Hall of Fame punter. I mean, I don't think anybody's I remember at the Superdome, one of his punts hit the roof at the Superdome in New Orleans.
Right.
And, nobody did that back then. Ray Guy was their third-string quarterback. I don't know if you remember that. He was actually their third-string quarterback, a great, tremendous athlete. The other guy that I, used to love watch to kick was Reggie Roby. Reggie Roby from the Dolphins. We used to wear a watch out there. I remember I used to look at him. He's wearing a watch out there. It's just one of those black watches, and I used to amaze me too. But Ray Guy set the standard for punting. Right? Remember
sure
the coffin corner kick. We don't see as much anymore, right? Their kicking games have changed a little bit, but you'd always see the coffin corner kick. And Ray Guy, man, that guy, his extension on his kick was amazing. That's what I mean. The Raiders back in the day, they had some of the greatest characters in the game. Matuzak, Alzado, right? Alzado was, I remember one time he got mad at Chris Ward, the offensive lineman for the New York Jets, and he ripped his helmet off and was trying to kill the guy, and Chris Ward is like, he's almost running away from this guy because, Alzado at that time, they found out later, was full of steroids, right? And one time in NFL films, I still remember this, he says this, and he says, I don't think there's a guy on this planet that can kick my ass. Honest to God, he said that. I'm like, wow, this dude he's on another level, right?
Absolutely.
Because, absolutely, there's guys that could have whipped his behind. Certainly there was. That's just the way he thought, though. In an exhibition against Muhammad Ali, when he played for the Denver Broncos boxing exhibition, it's an exhibition. But this dude is trying to knock Ali out. So finally, Ali peppers him with 20 straight punches, and it's like, "Hey, man, calm down, okay? This is what I do. You're just in here as an exhibition guy. That you're not a professional fighter. Calm down." But it made me laugh because he honestly thought he could beat Ali, right? So those are the characters that you had: Stabler, right? Bolitnikoff, and Lester Hayes, the Stickum guy.
Oh my God, Lester Hayes, Jack Tatum. Yeah. Oh, the assassin.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, remember Jack? Oh my goodness, Jack Tatum. I read a book. I read that book. They Call Me Assassin. I read it, and he just loved to hit people. Man, that guy was. Look at his mustache and his Fu Manchu mustache and his eyes. They're beady eyes, right? He loved nothing. And remember back then, Anthony, for people that forget, you and I don't. There's no fines for hitting people across the middle. Your helmet went flying. There's no fines. In fact, you're probably him and George Atkinson. Whew, man. So the Raiders were intimidating back in the day. They had the colors, the black and silver. So I'd love to see them get back to that again. We may not see all the characters that we saw at one time, but I think the league is better when they're good. Right. So I'm rooting for Antonio Pierce.
And the sad thing is, the reason we won't see that no more is because of the rule changes. So at best, the Raiders are going to have to get on board with either a high-profile offense or a very balanced attack, because you got Devontae Adams, you got Josh Jacobs, two of your biggest stars, and they are reduced to planets instead of stars. So, you got to get the stars off the ground. And they need an influx of some cognac or some Jack Daniels, because right now that offense is very listless and very, I can't even say predictable. It's very pretty much non-existent. But I tell you what we're going to do right here. We're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about passing not a one legend, but two legends. First, Bobby Knight, and then Walker Davis. They always say it goes in three, but I'm not going to ask who's next. But stay in the zone with yours truly, Anthony Smith, and my guest, Ed Nunez, from the land of, as he calls it, for 61 years entrapment, because that's been his home. We'll be right back. We are back for another segment of In the Zone. I went way out to the, as he calls it, since that's his home, he can do it and get away with it. He calls it the land of entrapment, because that's all he knows is the state of New Mexico. So much so until he is the voice of Western New Mexico sports. So, once again, my guest for this next segment, the one and only Mr. Ed Nunez.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I said, I've heard a lot of people say that. Oh, I'm leaving, never coming back, and I'll run into them a couple years later. Well, they couldn't. That's why they call it the land of entrapment. There's something about this place that, and again, people have moved on to better opportunities for themselves. That's fine. But for me, like I said, this has been my home for 61 years, and hey, man, I'm gonna die here. So this is my home. I'm not going anywhere.
Absolutely. So before we went into that last break, because we brought this up a little bit earlier and you kind of hit at it, but now we're going to really expound on it, the passing of Walter Davis. But before we get to him, just yesterday on my 99th episode, I went on ahead because there was breaking news that we lost Bobby Knight. And what can you not say about, as it's PTP or he's the coach of the year, it's the one and only, the general, Mr. Robert Montgomery Knight. I hope I did a pretty good impression of Dick Vitale there.
That's pretty good, yeah.
I mean, as successful as Bobby Knight was, he was as equally controversial, but, all the tabloids and publications that come out talking about him is going to talk about the controversial side of him. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to keep it all positive, because people, once they hear this, they're going to talk about, well, I remember when he did this, with the, the chair incident. People are going to remember that. So let's give them things that they can remember. What he did for the game of basketball. First of all, there weren't no stars on this team, even though we came to know Albert Chaney, we came to know Isaiah Thomas, we came to know Steve Alford. At the end of the day, it was more about the name on the front of the jersey than it was the name on the back of the jersey, if there was a name on the back of the jersey.
He never put names on the back of the jersey, just for what you said. I read Season on the Brink. I've read a couple of books about him, and he won 3 titles. And one thing about and look, he is who he is, man. He's a controversial figure. There's no question about it. But we'll concentrate on what winning the 3 titles. Steve Alford said this, who used to coach here in New Mexico, by the way, because Steve Alford coached here, and got us a 30-5 season, which we haven't had since. So, we had a product of Bobby Knight right here in the land of enchantment, man. He was here for a while, and then he went to UCLA. So, Coach Knight won 3 titles, and the motion offense, they said that he came up with, and then the suffocating man-to-man defense. He rarely played zone. Also won a gold medal for the United States, winning coach in 1984 on the team that he cut Charles Barkley and John Stockton and kept Steve Alford on that team. That was, controversial. Charles Barkley was mad about that for years.
There's another person that didn't make the cut, too. Came from right here, Wichita State University, Antoine Carr. Let's not forget about that either.
Oh, man. Antoine Carr was, people forget how good Antoine Carr was at Wichita State and then with the Utah Jazz in the pros. A very good player, very could rebound and shoot the ball. So, Coach Knight, he, was a protege to Mike Krzyzewski, coached him at Army, and Mike Krzyzewski went on to, at Duke. Of course, we know what kind of career he had. Coach Knight, for a while, tinkered here about coming to New Mexico in 1988. He was upset with Indiana, and he had this whole city. I still remember, man, excited. After the second or third day, I said to myself, yeah, man, he's not coming. He's just using that as a leverage, But I'll tell you, he had this, I remember reading the Journal, the Tribune. At that time, they printed 2 papers. They only print 1 now. He had the whole city really excited about maybe the prospect of him coming here. But he never did. But, he finished off at Texas Tech and won some more games there. And as you mentioned, the expertise in basketball, as far as the X's and O's, he's one of the best there ever was. He never cheated. Never, they said this in the paper today, that he disagreed with a lot of these NCAA rules, but he never violated them, never cheated. Graduated his kids, and
98% graduation rate. At least that's what his claim was now. Some might dispute it, but he said 98%. Him and some of his staff members, they graduated 98%. So if you think about that, that says a lot. Whether that's true or fabricated, it still says a lot.
Coach Knight is, he's a figure that's larger than life. He really was. At one time he was, they came out with the movie Hoosiers. That's when he was at his height, in '86, and the figure was, Gene Hackman, the coach, was based on Coach Knight. Of course, Gene Hackman, back there, that movie still cracks me up, man, because the lane is smaller, right? And then when Wilt comes in, they widen the lane. Good basketball movie, but a lot of it was based on Coach Knight and his his job that he was doing at Indiana at that time, and they hadn't won their last national championship. He had won 2, and remember this in '76, they're undefeated, the last team to go undefeated, 32-0. Bobby Wilkerson, Scott May, Kent Benson, Tom Abernathy. They did a special on HBO about 2 years ago on that, and they all got together, and that's when Coach Knight, he had some dementia at the end of his life, and but at that time he was still cognizant. He could still talk, and Coach Knight was an amazing. There's the other part too. We won't go into that. Today, those are the parts. I had a book on Coach Knight. Good nights on one part of the book, and then you flip it over, and then it's the bad night. So it was interesting to me because that's how much you and I love sports. Whenever I see a sports figure, I'm always like, they did something on Jim Thorpe the other day, and I'm like, I got to learn more about Jim Thorpe. He's an amazing guy, right? An amazing athlete, and so Coach Knight will always, I think. He coached at the time. Thinking about that, Dean Smith, John Wooden. There were some great coaches in college. Adolph Rupp at Kentucky. Some great coaches. And he beat them all. He beat a lot of them. A lot of those coaches. He did.
And that right there, all those coaches you just mentioned, that would be a show right there within itself. Legendary coaches that are gone. And then circling back, when you think about the players that Bobby Knight cut from the Olympic team. Imagine the players that were cut that could actually make another Olympic team. And the only competition that particular Olympic team that he put together would have would be the players that he cut. Because the teams that they played against in the Olympics really weren't much competition. So think about the players that he cut that could form an Olympic team and play against that Olympic team that won the gold medal. Imagine that.
Well, we mentioned Antoine Carr and Stockton and Barkley getting cut amongst some others, and that could have been the JV squad and still beating all those other countries.
Right.
And Michael Jordan, a member of that '84 team of the championship team at the Olympic Gold. You know what? And a lot of people, Bobby Knight coached that team as hard as he coached in Indiana. He wanted to win one for his country, man. And he coached. You play for him and you roll out the balls. He's not going to be easy on anyone. He expected stuff. He expected things to be done the right way as far as basketball went. And he says in that regard, he was an amazing. How much did he do for the game of basketball? The recruitment of Isaiah Thomas was interesting to me. Isaiah came. He came from Chicago, man, and there was some gangs in his neighborhood, and Isaiah's older brother and Coach Knight got into it. They got into an argument, and Isaiah still ended up going there. I always have to look back and think, hey, man, Isaiah played for Coach Knight. He played for Bob Knight and won a championship. And they had some falling outs over the years. They did. Isaiah was playing at the field house one time. I think he had said something about Coach Knight in the paper or somewhere, and Coach Knight came in and threw him out. But they got over it. When Coach Knight went back to Assembly Hall in 2020, Isaiah Thomas is right there, holding him and hugging him. And I thought that was a great, because Coach Knight had not gone back to Assembly Hall. He said he wasn't going to go back.
Never going to go back, right? Because they had basically based on the fire, his termination, and he made the comment that he said he wished all of them people were dead.
And I think a lot of that time, a lot of it, he walked some of that back.
Yeah.
But the thing about Coach Knight, he's 6'5", man. The guy was 6'5", so he had the size, right? Played at Ohio State. Never a great player. He was not a great player, and that's okay because not the greatest players we saw that are not the greatest coaches. Larry Bird was an okay coach. Magic was not a good coach. But he was just an amazing X and O. He could, again, this motion offense. They said showed that today, and then the suffocating man-to-man. Oh man, I just reading that, remembering that book, Season on the Brink. Man, the guy, he expected things, and if you didn't come, he wanted to win. That's it. And if you didn't play the game the right way, it's gonna, practice the next day was going to be hell, and the players knew it. And some of them, a coach like that today can't last. There's no way you can't do that anymore. You can't coach a certain way anymore. Athletes are not going to respond to that kind of coaching anymore. But back then, Frank Cush at Arizona State, the football coach, he was the same way. Frank Cush was a madman, right? Woody Hayes. And that was,
you read my mind.
That was one of Bobby Knight's heroes. Was Woody Hayes. General George Patton was one of his other heroes. And you've seen, I'm sure, the movie Patton. I've seen it like 30 times, and Patton was, he believed in, hey, man, we got to take these down. If you gave him a job to do, he's gonna do it as a military man. And Bob Knight believed that's the way things should be done, was his way. He said that. He said that in one of the clips they showed today. They're going to do things my way. I've forgotten more basketball than they'll ever know. This is what we're going to do, and that was it. Nobody questioned the guy. Who's going to question him, right?
And
it was funny.
And let me ask you this question right here, because I don't know. I need to find that clip because it'd be a good clip to play. But Bobby Knight really wasn't big on motivational speeches, but I think one of his best quotes, I mean, it should be embedded in my mind, but he said the best motivation is ass on the bench.
Yeah.
I
Ass
can't
meets bench.
Right.
Player. That was so funny. No. But one quick story in Blue Chips. There's this filming at the movie Blue Chips. He's the coach, right? He gets into an argument with an official that's supposed to be just for the camera, right? He's, but he starts yelling at this ref, "Get your fat ass down the court." God, it was funny. It was hilarious because it's just character. It's not even a real game. It's a make believe because Bobby Hurley's playing, and Bobby Hurley didn't play for Coach Knight,
right?
So made me crack up. I read it later that he really got into it with this official. So that was Coach Knight. But again, larger than life, right? A larger than life figure.
And I think they actually used that clip in the movie. Because if I'm correct, I think I remember him saying, "Get your fat ass down the court."
Yes, they did use it. They did use it. Because it did turn. It was supposed to be just ad libbing, and then Coach Knight's in the middle of the game. There's fans there. The basketball's out there, so he sees Indiana out there, even though that's not his team. Although Calbert Chaney was playing for him at that time, I believe. So he sees Indiana out there, and he just gets into character, and that was the character of Bob Knight. He hated losing. And it's funny because, you mentioned Dick Vitale, and he and Dick Vitale were friends, but Dick Vitale came up behind him one time unexpectedly, to kind of tease him, and, man, Knight threw him to the ground. And just walked off. They got over that. They were friends later. But Bob Knight was not a guy that you just come up and start teasing, man. That's not that guy. He'd do that to you. He could do it to you, but you better not do it to him. That's just
right. That's one of those situations. There's an old saying that says, "What's good for the geese is good for the gander." That didn't apply to Bobby Knight, though.
Not at all. Not at all. And again, rest in peace. What an amazing career Coach Knight had, and I'm glad they made peace at Assembly Hall with him going in there. I think he looked at his face, Anthony, and all the players around him, and he looked really happy, man. He did. He looked happy.
That was a very memorable moment to see all them people come together, and the fans, how they were just, I mean, it was like a WWE crowd. They were like, Bobby, thank you, Bobby, and the hand clap. I mean, the place was just magical to think that they overcame some of the ill will and let that happen. Like you said, you seen him do his little coaching moments, like pumping his fist, like, and pointing at, like, you get your, like we just said a while ago, you get. So yeah, it was magical to see that moment back in 2020, how the bridges were mended. They got over that to overcome a lot, get to that moment, which was well worth it. So I tell you what we're going to do now. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to conclude talking about passing of one Walter Davis, because that just caught us off guard as well too. So we'll be back in the zone for one final segment with my guest Ed Nunez. Don't you go nowhere. You're in the zone. You're locked in. Welcome back for what will probably be my last segment, In the Zone. And trust me, this is not work. This is called F-U-N. Fun. Hell, yeah, by the way, this is also my 100th episode. And I went all the way to the great state of enchantment, or some people call it entrapment, but they love it there. They love being trapped. Just like playing basketball. They love executing a half-court trap. My good friend in the state of New Mexico, none other than Ed Nunez, who has found time to just hang out with me for this afternoon. I done took away some time that he'll never be able to get back, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to ask for it. Ed?
Yeah, not at all, man. When it comes to sports, and like you mentioned, Bob Knight and then the Raiders. We brought up a lot of good memories. I remember just a lot of great things about both. And you're going to bring up another guy that passed away, and I've got some memories of him too.
That's right. Former Phoenix Suns star, UNC great Walter Davis dies at 69. What we need to know about him? Well, he spent 15 seasons in the NBA after starring in North Carolina. Died on Thursday. He was 69 years old. Per his alma mater, Davis passed away of natural causes while visiting family in Charlotte, North Carolina. Some points of interest, and then we're going to get on into this. Davis was a member of the United States team that won the gold medal at the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal. Walter Davis averaged 15.7 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists in 119 games over 4 seasons with North Carolina. He made an immediate impact after being selected by the Phoenix Suns with the 5th overall pick of the 1977 NBA draft. He was named the NBA Rookie of the Year in the 1976-78 and spent 11 seasons with Phoenix. A 6-time All-Star, he averaged 18.9 points, 3.8 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 3-point rebounds, and 1,033 career games with the Suns, Denver Nuggets, and Portland Trail Blazers. The Suns retired his number 6 jersey in 1994. So those are some points of interest to know about one Walter Davis, who just passed away today on this day, November the 2nd. Ed, what do you remember about Walter Davis?
Gosh, I had to jog my memory a little bit and had to look up. I remember, I think the thing about it was the full court speed, the athleticism. The Greyhound is his nickname, and just his elevation on his jump shot. He really, quick pull up, could pull up with a one hard dribble and rise. And just butter, right? That's what we say, butter. Butter, man. I think that's one of the things that I remember so much about him was just his athleticism. The Suns weren't a great team, when he played there. They were good. There was better teams in the West at that time. Sonics, Seattle had won a couple of titles. Portland won one in 77. Then the Lakers started taking over. Phoenix had some good teams, but they, Alvin Adams played with him. They had some good teams. Kyle Macy was a teammate, but they just they were overcome by better teams. But you think about the career he had in the NBA. They don't retire your number for nothing. When you get your number retired, you've had a pretty good, solid career with that team. And he had some good moments with Denver too. When you start losing a little bit of athleticism, you think about how high he used to jump, Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
He jumped really, and they don't call it the full court speed. So the end-to-end speed, and he had some amazing ability as a two guard. He's one of the best two guards in the league at that time. So that's what I remember most about him. We didn't get to watch a lot of Phoenix games. You think about it, the CBS game of the week at that time. People forget, there's not the 100 channels there is now. There wasn't ESPN or ESPN2 and NBA League Pass. There was none of that. People, look back and I'm like, wow, did you get it on League Pass? No, there wasn't anything like that. If you're lucky, you might get 1 or 2 Phoenix Suns games, a year, maybe. Right. The CBS late night games that they showed. And but I still remember him very well. They'd show highlights, and you'd get a Suns game. And if you're an NBA fan like you and I, you'd make sure you found ways to see highlights or see how he had done. Box scores. I used to check a lot of the box scores because they used to print them. They don't do that anymore because there's no room in newspapers anymore. But I was a box score follower, and he was an amazing. Of course, I watched him play in North Carolina too. So again, I think I told you when I read that again, I had to read it twice. Of natural causes at 69. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, he's alive and visiting. And it's like and that's what I mean. He's still, 69 is not old. I know a lot of people think, young kids these days think that's ancient. And I used to probably think that when I was that age too, but it's not. And, again, just a great career and a great man. And, I think gone too soon. But we mentioned that when God has your name, man, it's your turn. It's your turn. Yeah.
I mean, we could say all the narratives like, "Oh, too soon." His life, he's knocking on the door of 7, and that was not really promised to us. But if by chance we make it, and a little bit of overtime, so he was knocking on the door of 7, 10. I mean, so his life, like we say it's too soon, taken too soon, but he had a productive life. So it was his time, and our time is coming too. Whether we live to be 69, 59, 49, 39, 29, whatever time it is, it's our time. Whether we as people think it's too soon, that's the humanistic side of it versus the spiritual side of it. Of course, this is the sports talk. We're not going to get too spiritual, but sometimes that does come out in us. But yeah, the one thing I remember about watching him play, we had a George Gervin, and then you had a Walter Davis. George Gervin was like a prolific scorer. Walter Davis, as they would say, would be the 2.0. He was just as silky smooth as George Gervin. He just wasn't quite that prolific scorer that George Gervin was, but his game was smooth. And like you say, they call him the Greyhound. They didn't call him the Greyhound, for a reason. I mean, there was a reason behind that name. He was cat quick. I mean, Greyhound quick. I mean, when you think of a Greyhound, what do you think of? You think about them dogs racing around the track with that muffle on their mouth, chasing that make-believe rabbit around that, and you see that's how quick he was, but he was silky smooth with it that you forgot how quick he really was. But yeah, he was a very, as the songwriter said, smooth operator.
And then the elevation on the jumper, and he could pull up so quick. So, yeah, you're right. When you talk about greyhounds, they're one of the fastest dogs there is. So yeah, right. I mean, I think that nickname speaks for itself.
Very well earned. Very well earned. So we once again, yesterday we said rest in peace to Bobby Knight, and today we're saying rest in peace to Walter Davis. Well, Mr. Ed, Mr. Nunez, because Mr. Ed sounds like a fictional horse character, so I'm not going to put you in that category.
Tell you what, though, that show was hilarious, man. It really was. That was a little bit before my time, but you go back and watch some of those reruns, and man, that was a hilarious show. It really was.
Now wait a minute, I'm 56, you're 61, so how can that be before your time? Gee, Mr. Nunez.
Oh man, those reruns. Sometimes I'd still catch them. That was a funny show. That really was.
Absolutely. Well, man, I want to thank you for spending some time in the zone. You've actually made this 100th episode all worth it. I didn't line up a whole lot of guests, but you were the guest. So I want to say thank you for being on here. And we're getting ready to bring things to a close here in the zone. But until the next time, you take care of yourself and each other, and always stay locked in the zone with yours truly, Anthony Smith. Once again, special thanks to my guest, Mr. Ed Nunez.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Anytime, man. It's always a pleasure to talk sports with you. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.